Griffin can make the adaptation and maybe lose the Orianna Yasuo focus very early.
Here's what I've taken away from Griffin, though. They've made some repeat mistakes in single best of threes, right, Atlas? That's been the thing, is they've gone with a strategy that didn't work and doubled down and lost with it a second time. That does worry me for Griffin in best of fives, because with match days, they have been able to say, okay, maybe Lucian Brahm's not that good, we'll go to something else. But on a day, they've been quite inflexible. I wonder if they play multiple best of fives, whether they'll get over that hump later in the playoffs. They could be waiting in the grand final. All right, let's zoom in on match 72. We have 18 matches remaining here in the regular season. We've been banning away the Ashe in the first round.
Yeah.
That is a pick the pilot display. We see it from Ruler quite a lot. It is a good choice in a pick comp. And MVP, with ADD back in the lineup, is it back to time to roll back to the pick comp? MVP's bread and butter in previous seasons.
And the Ashe ban does sort of lend itself to potentially Griffin wanting to roll back their strategy. The Ashe was a bit of a problem for them when they were trying to play the Yasuo into the bottom lane. The Trundle going to be the final ban. Moving up, the ban priority definitely is the Troll. A lot of junglers standing out now in the Kindred and the Sejuani, but probably happy to trade it as Griffin considering something like the Swain, but they haven't found very much success on it. Zoe would make a lot more sense.
Griffin have a lot of champions that they are close to undefeated on. The Trundle 8-0, that was banned away. The Shen is available this game, but Griffin aren't willing to first round it, which does tell me that something interesting is going on in the bot lane for them. They'll take the Zoe, 8-2, Chovy's best champion by far, but also his most champion by far.
Yeah.
They're going to hold back on the Orianna priority. This does actually make something like a Kindred a little bit more viable on the side of MVP, as Orianna does very well against that Kindred, but it seems like Sejuani priority's back, and if anyone's a lover of the Sejuani, it is Yondon.
It is, and it feels like MVP have just snapped up the two next highest priority champions that are on the list. Does price them into probably playing something like an Awesome Dude or an Ezreal down there towards the bottom side of the map to try and hold on to some sort of control, or at least be able to weather the storm.
And obviously if you're MVP, you see Tom Kench ban, you say, ooh, pick comp, let's go. There's no Tom Kench to answer one of those engages. See what the jungle choice will be here. Tarzan had a great game on the Zac a few series ago. Going to return to it. So Zac versus Sejuani. We're going to be seeing increasingly, you'd imagine. This is a good matchup for Zac as the game goes on. Can get a lot of value out of the Kidnap, but the Arctic Assault can interrupt his Elastic Slingshot, and while Lehens can't pick up the Shen, he can pick up the Alistar. Seems like engage on all 5 champions on the Rift so far.
Yeah, and that Alistar is so flexible as well when you're talking about Awesome Dudes or 80 carries towards the bottom side of the map. Alistar can work with both of them very well. Ian is going to flash the Garen for a moment while he makes up his mind. Likely to see some sort of mid laner potentially here, but the Swain still available as MVP down the line getting high priority picks. Certainly not high priority for Griffin because they can't seem to make the Swain work, but it is going to be high priority for MVP. They're going to lock that one away.
Yeah, it's not a takeaway, but it is something that MVP used very well because ADD was our first Swain. After the Swain rework, Ian has played it, Pilot has played it. We prefer to see Pilot on a marksman, especially with a tank jungler. I think if you see Sejuani versus Zac, both teams desperately need a marksman. Otherwise, the front line is going to be very hard to kill. But the Swain, a flex pick for MVP. They ban away the Yasuo. You see the Alistar, and I think you were alluding to it, Atlas. That's one of the big combo champions with the Alistar, so it'll be banned away.
Well, still some flexibility here in this Griffin composition. Potentially Viper could play the Zoe even. They could throw things around, but otherwise they are looking for their marksman or Awesome Dude and Sword's top lane champion. They're going to ban away the Gangplank here as MVP get the bans handballed back to them.
I think Griffin will be happy if it ends up being the Swain versus Zoe. Zoe does very comfortably in this lane, has a big range advantage, so just kind of farms away, and if you get a kill, you get a kill. Speaking of getting kills, we will see a marksman banned against Griffin, but it's the Kai'Sa rather than something else. The Kai'Sa priority way up this week after Katie Rolster were the first to put in a duo lane against Genji right at the end of week number 5.
Shooting up the priority list, of course, in our previous series today. Kai'Sa not exactly finding success, but aiming still being able to pick up a hell of a lot of kills as Camille, the final ban on the side of Griffin, and it looks like they might be angling for a Gnar pick here for Sword.
The Gnar is possibly going to be picked up by ADD as well. Varus is the strongest of the marksmen left open. And he could also be taken. So let's see what MVP prize.
Ezreal is available for Pilot as well as Ian.
Okay.
He's going to head over to the Galio, meaning that it's looking increasingly like a Swain for the top side of the map.
Shen and Swain can do decent in a duo lane, and where's Pilot at in terms of his Swain? Is a kind of evolving question. We do think Marksman last pick, so tend to agree with you, Atlas. Would be ADD's first game in recent memory on the Swain, and Griffin say, well, we have to blind pick a top laner. We're clicking on this Gnar button.
Yeah, and they'd already banned for it, so it does make some sense there. They're going to lock it away, and now Griffin to round out this composition with potentially a marksman for Viper. I feel like this is a game for Viper to really start showing his mettle in the AD carry position like he was in Challenger.
They need damage. Right now, you desperately need damage. MVP is endlessly tanky already. Let's see where the damage comes from. Vladimir is open, but they'd be very low on physical damage if they went to that fallback Vladimir. What are we going to see? All right.
Ezreal makes a little bit more sense.
That was a concerningly late hover on the Alawi. We're not going to see it this game. It's going to be the Ezreal fallback for Viper.
Yeah, and Ezreal Zoe once again. We saw Kingzone use it to pretty great effect in game number 2 versus Afrika. We've been seeing it all season. To be honest, this particular combo does work well cleaning up fights that are a little bit more chaotic. Now MVP thinking about what they want, as that would be a top laner, which means that we may see for the first time Pilot on an awesome dude of the Swain variety. They're going to move the Kennen up there for the classic Kennen versus Gnar matchup, like you say, an evolving matchup, but generally considered one that the Kennen can win.
Been doing better for the Gnar recently, a lot of on-hit Kennen. We'll see if ADD sticks with that trend. Been a bit out of the loop, of course, with his medical condition, so we'll see what he's favoring. Pilot, like you say, debuting on the Swain here, Swain Shen. A lot of synergy and not going to be too chipped away, but the range advantage for the Ezreal can be so big. And Ezreal Alistair, a very big fallback lane for a lot of great teams. Kingzone Dragon X in spring season, for example. Chovy on his comfort, but MVP have combo CC for days. Potential if Yondu gets rolling. There's so many people to back him up and make these side lanes pay on the side of Griffin.
And speaking about making side lanes pay, you can see the summoner spells certainly feeling like both teams want to scrap pretty early on. We've given up. The teleports might be a sign of the fact that the players are playing on a new patch now on the live server, but still a little bit different there for the bottom side. Not going to be teleporting around very early in this game, wanting to stay in the lane and try and conquer it themselves.
Pretty standard drops, though, all things considered.
Yeah.
No super insane stuff. One awesome dude versus one marksman. Griffin, the team, to jump on the marksman, but it's the Ezreal that has been the fallback for Viper in recent memory. Griffin will just want to close this one out 2-0. Again, Griffin on that chase for the first overall finish on the LCK and going straight to that grand final. I see a BBQ Galio skin going on the mid lane. Let's hope that MVP, they drop some of the smites, but let's see how their play looks with their top laner back in the lineup.
Yeah, and we'll see whether this Swain flexing to the bottom side for the very first time for MVP is actually going to work out. Ian's a great one. We'll see where the Pilot is too as we hit game 1.
생성까지 30초 남았습니다.
Just love the MVP call leader. He is just always so enthusiastic. Like a lot of our MVP fans are.
I don't love Lehens. He doesn't get the cowbell. This could have been another cowbell and also chicken dance game. Sadly, dropped by Lehens. It's much more serious. The sword is trying to tilt us.
Yeah, at least he's a gentleman. Although a gentleman, I guess, wouldn't do that, as that's an adorable Viper picture. And we can see that it is a pretty damn good likeness.
And that is a pretty good Swain there for Ian.
And Ian played the Swain 8 times. We were expecting it to go into his hands as the last pick was there, often then banning away for the mid lane as they're just spamming at each other over and over again. This is something that Griffin wouldn't have expected, to move that Swain towards the bottom side. Whether it's actually going to affect how this game's outcome is going to be, I'm not entirely sure. But MVP certainly have a plan for how this one's going to work. MVP most likely going to utilize ADD in that AD carry role towards the end of the game, given the fact that he has pressed the attack, so will be more of that consistent damage dealer and trying to win this lane at the same time.
No leash for Tarzan on the bot side. No leash, Zach, always a little bit sad, but slowly make his way through. The power farming still available to Zach. Can go Q level 2 and power farm his Gromp and his blue buff at the same time, but in kind of League of Scuttles, you have less ability to do that so early.
Yep.
Doesn't get you to level 3 anymore either, so not of the same value as it was back in spring season. There was double wards on both the top and bot lane Scuttle, so a lot of information to both sides. Is we'll call that one redemption.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what was going on there. Some explosions in the mid lane. I'm glad that the Observer left it pretty early on because Zoe can make things very, very confusing.
We've seen 4 redemptions in the laning phase before, so that can just be the way with the Zoe W.
A little bit of RNG available there that can either bite you or really be amazing, depending on which side of the matchup you're on. So happily pushing this lane forward. I think the bottom lane is where we really need to look for both MVP and Griffin. If Pilot can pop off, certainly is strong as, okay, certainly is Gnar favored so far this season. You mentioned that, of course, this used to be the lane that you picked the cannon into. Hasn't been so far.
And it still is in a vacuum, but LCK Summer 2018 has been exactly the opposite of a vacuum. It has been just so many evolutions, twists and turns, a lot of breathing room, so many matches being played, a lot has changed. And the end result is that the on-hit cannon, which is also a departure. In the past, it was AP cannon beats the Gnar, and I feel like AD cannon can do so too, but it has a much more limited role, and there's certain itemization that delays the amount of time till there's finally an item point where cannon can dunk on the Gnar in a 1v1, and all those points together has meant that the cannon has struggled, and that's 3 in a row. With the first game, it was cannon beating the Gnar, but 3 times in a row, the Gnar has been able to hit item spikes, not die, and in some cases even solo kill the cannon. So just like that Gnar versus GP matchup was going the way of GP by the end, it feels like Gnar, the defensive side of the matchup, is winning more often than not.
Yeah, despite the fact that ADD, like we are seeing right here, is able to get these waves shoved and actually get a lot of harassment in there over the top of the Gnar. It's not all about how the lane goes in the early game, though. That dictates exactly what's going to happen. Early game pressure needs to be built around, and we'll see whether MVP can do that with cannon pushing topside.
And also, shorter death timers in the early game and stopwatches mean that the early game is less likely to just close the game at 25 minutes. So there is a bit of extra impetus for the game to go along. There is always that chance the cannon will just lose his role.
Yeah, and also Griffin like it when games go long, so it does play into their wheelhouse. Griffin holding this wave very close to their side as Tarzan is moving down here. Yondu is on one of his own wards, but we'll discover that this is a very empty jungle. It's now Motive. He's in trouble, never moved, not actually going to land, but Tarzan also not going to be able to find the Swain with the Elastic Slingshot, meaning that you're going to get a flash, but that's about it.
The moment that he was spotted, it was unlikely the gank would be successful, but you'll take a Shen Flash. It removes a lot of threat from your duo lane. Not the biggest reward, but one you will definitely accept. Seeing Sejuani, I believe she may have been spotted, looking for a gank onto Chovy here. Double cleanse like you illustrated, and only 1 teleport inside of Griffin. Surprisingly honest for patch 8.13.
Yeah, looks like MVP understand exactly what the problem for Kennen has been as well, given the fact that he can get outscaled in a lot of these situations against the Gnar. What they've done is just warded like crazy towards the top side so that ADD will have all of the agency just to smash this lane as hard as he can.
And MVP do have agency of their own, Atlas. They have 3 teleports, a Shen ultimate, a Galio ultimate. They have the ultra ability to rotate against 1 teleport. So that is the sort of thing where if you just lane and don't use the teleport to either get an item timing or gank, it doesn't really matter. So I want to see MVP make plays, but this might be a Griffin play.
Yeah, we're going to throw Yondu and Motive together, and Chovy just able to get the fish in the barrel. The Ignite's going to pick that one up as Elastic Slingshot. Going to get Tarzan to close the gap, but thankfully for MVP fans, doesn't land onto Ian. So that's just 1 pick off, and first blood going to Griffin for Lehen.
Really weird read that MVP thought they were safe enough as a duo to roll through the river there with the Shen that had no flash. Kind of a very weird map read. They thought they were strong in an area where they were weak. Another redemption comes down. The burst combo is good, and Shen goes down. A bit too easy for the side of Griffin.
Yep. Chovy's such a good Zoe player. He always gets the redemptions.
We used to have the famous Oceanic player Radier, who always could choose when he crit for some reason. I know that was what you were referring to.
I was.
I just wanted to mention Radier.
Yeah, I know. It's been a while. He's off being a lawyer in Hong Kong or something, I think, at the moment.
I guess life works out then.
Yeah, certainly does, but I miss having our most famous Oceanic player in the league.
Sadly, by the time he got on the international stage, he'd kind of fallen away from his ultra-dominant early days.
Yeah.
His peak was 2012, 2013, where the difference between him and the second best AD carry in the Oceanic scene was
2012 especially, that was his year. That was the year he got recognized, I believe. It was Double Lift that was like, this guy's really good. He could move to North America and start playing in the big leagues.
And guess what? We do have an Oceanic AD carry soon to debut in the big leagues, as of course Echo Fox has set up their roster for Lost to debut.
Yeah.
In the NALCS tonight, I believe. So we wish you the best of luck, Lost. A Oceanic import doing well is a good sign for the Oceanic scene.
It is. Miss Lost from the OPL, but there's the Flash. Pulverize is easily able to get everything on top of each other, and Motive, he's running the wrong direction. This ninja, I mean, if he was an actual ninja, then maybe going the wrong direction and sneaking around the back door would be a good idea, but this time it's going to be Lehens, stacks up the stun, True Shot Barrage. He's going to allow the kill to go over to Viper eventually, I believe. Tarzan's going to pick it up with his Stretch Armstrong.
Moto's been a bit exposed in this duo lane. Wonder if Max is going to be coming in for game number 2 already. Game isn't decided at 8 minutes, but in the span of 8 minutes, he's lost his flash and died twice. So not a great look for the Shen.
No, not ideal. Tarzan has been spending a lot of time towards the bottom side of the map. Yondu has been able to create the space for ADD. ADD may not have the lead that he necessarily wants here on the top side, but is able to keep this wave pushing forward, keep the Gnar down, make sure that Sword has to be using his teleports very defensively, things like that. I know the theory is certainly there for MVP, but they probably would have liked their Shen to not die. That's generally how it goes.
It's a very reasonable thing to ask. So
yeah, I think so.
Unfortunately, he's been unable to follow up on that very reasonable request. Griffin in a nice point of power in basically every role. Tier Sheen, Lost Chapter, Boots of Mobility, Cinderhulk already done, even Mercs to stop the all-in from the Gnar. So I think at one item, they are very, very happily ready to go here. And guess what? We already had the good old Ezreal Zoe in our previous series. We know exactly what they want to do. In fact, it's Ezreal Zoe Gnar again. So while it's not a Sejuani jungle for Griffin, it's similar to what Kingzone did in game number 2. They want to get out of the laning phase with 2 items on their Ezreal, a Ludens on their Zoe, and then if you don't make the right engage MVP, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yep, and also Griffin can get themselves into a sieging scenario. They can use their Gnar theoretically to split push if he's able to catch up to the cannon in his power, which has been how it's been working so far as late game Gnar versus cannon matchups are concerned. And then move Sword in, potentially get that team fight utilizing the Alistair and the Zac. It's one of those pretty straightforward compositions. Griffin pretty good at playing when they understand that this is what this comp needs to do, and then let's do it.
The early gold from the kills means 2 items there earlier. The grouping in mid lane happens earlier, as Chovy might have to blow a summoner here.
Yep, does have the cleanse, immediately gets rid of it, and Justice Punch not going to land. They might try and turn this one around here as Tarzan's going to jump forward. Really, really good use of the Flash and the Arctic Assault in order to get Yondu out of the way, and Ian also. And Griffin are going to be thwarted in their attempts to counter gank.
Does feel like Griffin are playing on 1.5 times speed, though, and the MVP are playing on regular speed, because the play that Chovy turned around happened in slow motion for him, and unfortunately for MVP, it was just a huge damage trade that went the way of Griffin, so a little bit too easy. It seems like casually Griffin are opening up a very big tempo lead over their enemies, and like we were alluding to, that means the siege starts earlier. MVP, even if they layer their CC, there's cleanse, and there's potential for them to run out of damage in the early game. And that's going to be a problem because they're going to have to keep Griffin honest. Otherwise, they'll watch their structures roll down around them.
Yeah, and because they've invested so much into giving ADD a good time here towards the top side, they really do need to try and get something from it. You don't invest into something unless you want to return, and so far there hasn't really been much of a return. You're going to look at this and say 13 creeps ahead doesn't really matter as far as the Gnar versus Cannon matchup. He's still happily farming up here. Tarzan, he's going to be able to get the boot back utilizing the ward. Yondu doesn't want anything to do with it as Lehens. He was roaming up, wasn't actually spotted, but not going to take too many risks is Yondu.
Ian not taking risks either, but to the tune of actually interrupting his Rod of Ages for a Mercs. I guess he could not go Rod of Ages, but I think going into ability power is pretty much required on Galio. Nice little trade here for Pilot, but delaying damage for MVP is so risky because you need to make those plays in the mid-game stick. and with low damage, it becomes less likely.
Well, speaking of low damage, there wasn't any damage there from Yondu onto the Rift Scuttler, so the Sejuani just has to watch it die. Tarzan and Chovy now with control of this river. MVP do have some cheeky wards in there, and Ian's going to turn up. He walks over a ward. It was interesting from Chovy. He's going to have to use his flash in order to get out. Lehen's trying to get in here as well as the ultimate. He's going to land, but the stopwatch will keep Chovy alive. Lehen's holding onto the pole for so long and keeps the headbutt to get rid of ADD. Slicing Maelstrom does nothing, but Pilot, he's moving up and he has that health advantage over Viper. They are going to take down the Zac, but Sword, he's looking for more. We'll have the Naonda 3 into the wall. The wallop to get over the top as well as Pilot. That stopwatch ain't going to keep you alive, but the flash might. Trouble Bubble comes through. ADD flashed on by Sword. Boulder over the side. Viper gets in there. Mystic shot. And somehow, Griffin turn around the team fight.
It's not often you see a 3-man Gnar at 12 minutes, but it's exactly what we get, and it was huge coming through from Sword, who's been great on this Gnar pick, an old favorite of his in the Challenger Series. It's a big turnaround. Stopwatch timing here is big. Let's talk about how this happens. That's his own flash that is on cooldown very early from Chovy. Then he gets stunned up. The problem here is that Motive Taunt flashes him to give him a flash to escape with at the end of this play. That's the only reason he can actually get out of the ultimate. The hero's entrance there from the Galio is the counterfeit flash coming through from the Shen. Tarzan goes down. They don't have another teleport to extend his life, but then look at this little play. Hits everything perfectly. Does Sword, and Teamfight Gnar at 12 minutes is probably going to be a good sign for Teamfight Gnar at 30.
Yeah, and it feels like Sword, he experienced what Cuvée did to him on the Gnar in our series a couple of days ago. Able to replicate that. Of course, a fantastic Gnar player in his own right, but we're getting more flavors of exactly that style of Gnar that's just so beautiful to watch.
Sword's 3-0 Aatrox was his big pick pre-Aatrox rework. He's 3-0 on the Gnar, so he's already at the same results, and it does seem like it increasingly will be a must-take blind pick, given that the Kennen pick doesn't work into it. The only pick we've seen work pretty reliably is the Jace, and that's, of course, a risky champion that not everyone can either play or execute on as a team of 5.
Yeah, and often if you're going to pick the Gnar, we see Gangplank bans all over the place, so Gangplank's still considered something you can pick into it, as Tarzan considers a kidnap on the bottom side of the map, and that is a very dead Swain. Motive, he's used to the death chamber, and he wants to just see the death for a little bit longer as he goes into stasis, wastes the stopwatch entirely, and will just die.
Pretty sure the song goes, "See Your Death," and yeah, I think Motive actually saw his death coming there. Unfortunately, he tried to taunt through the Zac ultimate. That just meant that he also was kidnapped and died. So that's not how that works, unfortunately. If you see it already being channeled, just taunt in a different direction.
Get out of it, yeah.
Instead, he opted into it, and now, yeah, MVP is pretty much open bot at this point.
Well, I mean, it is pretty open because they're missing the turret as well. They are going to head back there, try and defend this inner, but this just means that the game has collapsed from the bottom side towards the top. And you can see ADD still got lane control. Still got a massive lead as far as farm. That's 30 CS now. But still just getting dominated by Sword, who's going to jump on top of him. The crush, will it be off cooldown? He's looking for the boulder. Stand United comes down. Yondu's in here, and he knows that he's dead. Spams some emotes. They're going to waste some time as Griffin. Can they get anything from the life of their top laner?
Here's a hard game. Don't have the audio on. Watch MVP for the first time and ask which player was missing for a week in the hospital. And you definitely wouldn't choose ADD, who's doing his absolute best in the top lane. Ian's going to lose his turret because, guess what? Ezreal and Zoe went for a roam to mid lane and did the siege thing we talked about, but the siege is ending.
Yep, and Lehen's, he's golden. They're going to try and find the battle stars. Good God, the AoE damage as Chovy's dancing around the backline of this fight. Motive going to be his first target as Pilot. The Demonic Ascension's going to do nothing. The Demon Flare, can it offer the damage? He doesn't quite have the stacks for it, and he's not even going to hit anyone with it either. So beautiful turnaround from Griffin in the mid lane. They lose Lehen's, but they're still going to be able to pick up the advantageous trade.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're not able to make anything out of their AoE engage. They get one kill. It's the stopwatch and kill onto Lehen's, but no more. More gold goes to Ezreal now, 3-0-2. Going for a double tier. He was probably watching in the back and said, oh, that looks pretty good, Prey. I'll copy that. And Griffin have just followed in the footsteps of Kingzone Dragon X and now have a much bigger lead in terms of tempo than perhaps the 3,000 gold lead indicates.
I feel like Viper going double tier makes the most thematical sense out of almost all of our AD carry players because he's such a good mage, such a good hyper carry, and such a good AD carry player that he fits all three of these baskets at the same time.
I love that you bring that up because it's a great interview, an English interview with Viper that hit Reddit the other day. It's done by Ashley Kang, Ashley K-A-N-G, on Twitter. With Viper himself, who said the reason why he found Ezreal and the Lucian a strong pick is because the champion plays a lot like a mage. We call them AD casters, but thinking of Ezreal like a mage makes a lot of sense. The thing he's trying to get to is, yes, you can't build Infinity Edge Critical Strike AD carries after the nerfs, but Ezreal always fit with his different build path. He still has poke and doesn't have to commit. We might see a committal, though, from the side of MVP.
Well, we're going to see it from Sword first as ADD not going to get walloped this time as Hero's Entrance going to keep ADD alive. They're trying to deal with all of the blobs and will get them, but we're not going to have enough here from Chovy. Oh, he does land the Trouble Bubble. Sword alive for so incredibly long. Yondu will eventually fall as now Chovy having to deal with three people, gets taunted, has the cleanse, and will be able to get away for the moment. Paddlestar not going to find the target. MVP are going to be able to win bottom side, but what can Griffin get on the top side of the map? The answer is a little bit of pressure. Viper pushing a wave, otherwise nothing else. Good play from MVP.
Yeah, really good plays from the side of MVP away from where Viper is. That's where Griffin are a lot weaker. When Viper isn't there to hit the fight, they will have their own damage concerns. Sword was chunked out very early. This is MVP with a great proactive play. There's nothing that Sword can do. They take down Tarzan, who's been focused down a couple of times first in these fights. It's good attempt by Chovy, but he doesn't have enough damage at 1.5 items to actually team fight Zoe through such big tanks so early in the game. So eventually he does have to make his great escape. He flashes about 800 times so far this game. Hooray for Zoe. But the Ezreal's not there, so that means that good things happen for the side of MVP.
They also get some information there as he almost steals away a blue buff. Griffin still will have the lead. The tune of approximately 2,000 gold. Tarzan going to be starting on the Rift Herald. Feels like Tarzan's been absolutely everywhere this game. 1, 2, and 5 now. 6 out of the 8. 75% kill contribution ain't bad at all. Certainly has been dying a lot more than Peanut Zac that we saw game 1 of our first series of the day, but has certainly been very proactive. And that wasn't what we used to see on Zac. He wasn't the proactive champion, wasn't the proactive jungler in the early game. This time around today, we're seeing a lot of proactivity from the big pink blob in this case.
And a lot of proactivity from MVP. They have to be proactive. They have this global comp with a lot of engage. Pick CC on every single champion, even the cannon. Can pull off the picks, and the reason why I've been happy with MVP is they've been proactive around the right spots. They actually are proactive around the 4 bot lane and ignore the Ezreal. They say, actually, Ezreal being contained by Pilot on the Swain is fantastic for us. Let's fight where the Ezreal isn't. That's why they were able to come away with a pretty good trade was MVP. And they also have come away from the early game with a 2-item cannon that not too many people can duel.
Yeah, he's very, very strong. Now push that lead out to 40 CS. Feels like the investment in giving ADD the best lane possible is certainly working out. Being able to play around him as well on the bottom side of the map in that dive was another point of genius for MVP. You said good to avoid Viper, but also good to have ADD there to get his damage into the fight.
And the converse is that Griffin should have been a bit more respectful when they knew there was no way for Viper to get to bot lane. That's a teleport Ezreal on the top side. Maybe you can come up with some sort of team fight, but when we saw the Gnar being turret dive, Sword could just left the turret a lot earlier, so a couple little map allocation issues here for Griffin. Not quite as sound as Kingzone were in their very similar game earlier today.
Yeah.
So MVP have work to do. That is happy that the Rod of Ages could be starting stacking for Ian. It's behind schedule, about 16 minutes he picked it up, but gonna have to start on it. 2 items are now on Pilot before he's ever really gotten to a team fight. That is also a good thing for the side of MVP. So while there's no true good news stories, there is places to play around, including this cannon on the top.
Especially is the cannon on the top side. But if he's top side, it means this Infernal Drake should go over to Griffin for free, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Yondu knows that it's there, but also knows that a lot of their money, a lot of their advantage is in ADD, who's now just shoving minion waves towards Sword, desperate for his Black Cleaver. Frozen Mallet, the understandable first choice if you're in a tough matchup for the Gnar.
Does a little bit of everything, keeps the Gnar away from melee range of the cannon. Just, control him as much as you can. AD's hunting here.
Yep, they try and find the ultimate in the mid lane, but they're not going to get it. Good slow onto Lehans as the kidnap is going to come down all the way away from the hero's entrance as well as Sword is going to get an Nara into the wall. Lehans wants to get a massive poke, gets it onto 4, but I don't know whether it's good enough. Where's the follow-up? It's just not there at all as the cow is going to die. Chovy was nowhere near the fight and lands the trouble bubble, but it's not quite enough. Gets himself the active from the Blade of the Ruined King from ADD, thank you very much. But otherwise, it's just Lehans dying.
Whenever the enemy team clumps up, you think about the engage, baited by the 4-man. I'm like, where's the Mega Gnar? It was an exhausted Gnar who was right near him, so there was no follow-up Atlas.
Also, the Gnar was used to stop the taunt from being utilized earlier. A little bit unfortunate here as Griffin looked like they were poised to find a phenomenal team fight.
You definitely see the other fight where they just get a huge wombo. That's what, of course, we're all baited into. Watching this replay, and the start is so good. Like you say, they disengage the hero's entrance. It seems like everything will be wasted. Sword ults, and then Lehans should be saying, where's my Zoe? Look at the minimap. Zoe was near the red buff, and unfortunately, there's no follow-up damage. Viper had already used his cleanse, so has to be a bit more judicious with his positioning, has to respect things like the AoE taunt. It wasn't the time for a 4-man knockup, but it was a nice 4-man knockup.
Yeah, it's one of those isolated plays where you're like, oh, damn, it's beautiful, and then he's just dead. And nothing really gets gained. And have a look at the damage in the last team fight. Viper, of course, able to utilize his Mystic shots very, very well. But it was a fight won by MVP, and few more of these, and MVP will be able to even out the gold lead and will be able to move their composition, which is pretty easy to execute, towards the later stages of the game where they can find these fights that they can win, take a Baron, and take down Griffin.
And Griffin are short on damage at the moment to actually puncture through the insanely tanky core of MVP. Right now, no Blade of the Ruined King. You probably want to start working towards a Lord Dominic's if you're Viper, but you already priced yourself into the Seraphs at some point, and there's arguments for both. You can go Blade Seraphs and just try to frontline a bit more with your extra overshield. You go for the armor pen also, just to do the most damage safely.
Also, Shelly is going to be
wasted.
Yeah, completely wasted in the mid lane. Just was going to time out, so Tarzan was going to use it.
They can back it up here with no Cannon and Galio out of ult range. It might still get a charge.
Well, it's not. It's just going to get its eye poked. And Shelly is going to go to the Death Chamber before getting any of the work done. Baron already in that pit, been there for 4 minutes time. When Griffin's in the game, you've really got to... sorry, when MVP's in the game, you've got to talk about Baron as often as possible. They do love the Purple Worm.
And when Griffin are emulating a comp we saw earlier today, we have to talk about the kinks here. There's definitely been some kinks in the execution. We haven't seen... We saw the Rift Tower be wasted. We saw the bot lane could have been disengaged from, wasn't. The closeout here is not as surgical as we saw from Kingzone in our first series. And for a team that we've already said a couple of times is shooting for 4-match victories 2-0 to close out their season first, these are not mistakes they can continue to repeat, because if they hadn't had such a charmed early game, they could actually be way in the hole in this game number 1.
Yeah. Motive honestly handed them the early game with his... inting on the Shen, which was a bit of a problem on the bottom side, but since then, Stand United's have been good. I mean, he's 0-5-6 now, but that's all 6 of the kills have been around where Motive is.
Unfortunately, if you think about it though, he's died 5 of the 8 times and been involved in 100% of his own team's kills. So he's definitely been in the thick of it, but perhaps he should choose his battles, is what we're trying to say.
I think so too. And, you know, the Shen not very tanky in the early game. That's a little bit of a problem. Viper was like, oh, damn, he's got a smite, but I guess I'm definitely not getting this one. That's going to be the case. Yondu picks up that Rift Scuttler. MVP.
Oh, ADD's going for the I really want to win the split push build, and you can understand that.
Yep.
Because he can split push and know that he has all of his friends packing up and leaving him. We've already said it's triple teleport and also the Shen ultimate. So only Yondu has to make the arduous trek to the cannon.
Sword, he's getting pretty tanky. He's got his 2 items that he really does want, but he wouldn't want them necessarily into this matchup. It's a little bit more for against tanks is the Black Cleaver and the Frozen Mallet. Such a good one, especially against melee champions, but against ADD's Cannon, he's probably still going to be very, very happy in this 1v1 for quite some time.
You go Black Cleaver because without the CDR, it feels really bad.
Oh yeah, you have to build the item, right? Yeah.
There is an counter. There's an item that would help you in the lane more. That'd be Warmogs, but it offers so little to Gnar most of the times. Gnar is much more about his threat in a team fight than actually soaking, because he's only conditionally tanky in a frontliner. That you go Black Cleaver and say, if I get any ganks, I have kill pressure with these 2 items. and then you get a Warmox later if you really are going to be relegated to dealing with what is now just a Kennen build that Gnar can do nothing against.
And he just went back and got the Rage Blade, so it's pretty much over for having fun against the Kennen in a 1v1.
Ugh, fun police.
Yeah, he's still going to be not exactly the most potent team fighting threat unless he can find a good position. You can self-peel with the Slicing Maelstrom quite nicely. But MVP building around this Kennen, which is split pushing and also being basically the marksman for the team. Working nicely. Can they execute is the question. 1,000 gold being the difference. It's all going to come down to execution. It's not going to be about who's going to be ahead and can snowball a lead anymore. Griffin did have that situation earlier. That ship has sailed. Now this game feeling like it's back on a knife edge.
And if this front line from MVP is robust enough, maybe he can fit your billing Atlas and be the backup marksman for the side of MVP. His
that's a cute one as ADD.
Yeah, he's dead.
Yeah, he's going to be able to pick up this kill pretty easily. Sword does get Mega Gnar, gets a stun, but it's not enough. And ADD is going to grab it. Stands United on cooldown. Can Griffin get anything else done? The answer is no.
Quite a lot of time, though. 40 seconds for Sword to respawn, so this should be an inner turret if the Kennen can keep pushing. Very easy to pick up the kill. They probably didn't even need the Shen, in hindsight. Do you just go Frozen Mallet to continue the chase pressure onto the Gnar is a question I wonder if ADD will answer. He'll keep pushing in bot side. What does Griffin do?
Well, what they're going to do is try and throw some poke over onto Pilot, as Viper is very, very strong. Neuromana as well as his Blade of the Ruin King Trinity Force completed. Just needs that Seraph's Embrace, but that second tier has been stacking for a long time. Could be around 30 minutes if he does complete the item. He's been waiting in this mid lane for quite some time as well.
80 pulled away because the rest of the members of Griffin started to dart bot side. Didn't have any coverage, no wards on this bot side of the map for him to spot. What we spotted now is Tarzan, but AD has already started disengaging, so no inner turret there is going to be taken by ADD this time.
He's now going to be backing as well as MVP looking towards the Baron. Cloud Drake going to be started here from Tarzan in vision of MVP. Griffin going to know that the Baron is being at least looked at here by MVP.
All the control wards are from Griffin in that area, so Griffin probably don't care too much.
Oh, hey Trophy. He is going to discover MVP, but not exactly hot enough on the trigger finger as he puts his face into 4 members of the team.
But since Griffin have really fully committed to Cloud, giving that up for MVP is fine. It's just what are they taking on the other side of the map? They didn't get a pick. Motive missed the taunt like we saw on screen. So unfortunately it ends up just being a donation rather than trade, which is what MVP were actually setting up for.
Yeah, it's going to be 3 Drakes there as well. Don't need to talk about which ones they are. Talk about it every single time. And Griffin just going to continue moving towards the late game that they're very confident in their play around. Maybe not against a team like Gen G like we saw a couple of days ago, but that is the ultimate late game team, and they're also world champions. MVP can't quite boast that just yet. So maybe playing confidently moving into a late game against a team that is set up relatively well at that stage of the game might still be okay even if you don't have necessarily the on-paper better composition at that stage.
When we see ADD come out of the Lightning Rush, 2.4 attack speed, so almost capped already. Press the attack on hit Kennen can be a menace in team fights. Will already be granting that 12% bonus damage as well because he already hit level 17. Tarzan just trying to spot.
Has to get himself out of the way, but he's very tanky at the moment. It's Pilot. Headbutt Pulve comes in, and there's the hero's entrance. Ultimate is going to go wide as now Ian wants to get this taunt. Tarzan flashes in like the hero he is, and Viper going to follow with the arcane shift. They're ruthless as Griffin just chasing after MVP, and Viper can just keep doing it forever. Picks up another kill. True Shot Barrage to tag the Galio. And somehow Griffin have done it. ADD also unable to fight Sword with the Bramble Vest that he picked up under the turret.
Viper seems okay on these AD carry champions that he's heard so much about, showing us his challenger mechanics there. Hitting literally everything, even the fadeaway jump shot with the ult. Headbutt away onto Sejuani. How about a knock-up as well and a free Baron to Griffin?
Yep, and this is why we see Lehens having the alley taken away from him, banned away from him. The Baron is going to be there. He plays goalkeeper so beautifully against Yondu. And MVP, it went from basically a 0 difference game to a very big lead and a lot of control for Griffin.
But I'm watching Viper this fight because I always want to take away a learning about Griffin, and understanding fully how good Viper is on the AD carries at LCK level is something we hadn't seen before. So for him to have a team fight like this, where he was very smart to not fully engage for the first kill, waited on it, and even hits the fadeaway ult here. I'm like, okay.
He literally hit every single ability.
He did.
Yeah.
So, you know, he might end up being half decent.
Yeah, I think he's all right. And I'm glad that you brought up that interview, because that's exactly what he was saying. He's like, guys, but remember, I'm an AD carry player. I played it for a very long time, and, you know, we were pretty good, if you remember. And he's reminding us now.
He is decked out. We wondered where he would go after the Blade of the Ruined King. It was the Lord Dominic's. So,
just outright.
He is a monstrously strong. He'll delay the safety for later because he wants to do damage.
Yeah.
Get in there, do your thing, Griffin. You have the Baron. 2 minutes left, so a couple of minion waves here. Dives, perhaps not recommended, but if Viper starts doing free damage, it's going to be scary for MVP, and that's some ults down.
Yep. The 2-3 split is coming in here as ADD off on the backline. Sleepy Trouble Bubble's going to come in. The Kidnap goes down, and even through the hero's entrance, the cannon is going to die. Has no tankiness. Ian with the stop rod. She's trying to be the hero for MVP. It's just not going to work. Viper all over the map. Arcane shifting on top of MVP. The first Mystic shot misses, I feel like, this whole game, as Viper is looking for Pilot as his next target. He'll get him. And MVP, they crumble under the threat of this Baroned up Griffin team.
Seems like Griffin are going to win the game here. They were able to stick the mid game here, made the right decisions, got the Baron, and with that Baron, they should win the game.
Yep, it was very cool, calm, and collected in the mid game as there's the headbutt pole. This ain't cool, calm, and collected. This is a very dead MVP. Spirit's Refuge is in there, and that's going to mean that it's the Zac that grabs the kill. It's all about the Ezreal this game, but this game is no longer happening. Nexus to fall, and Griffin to win game one.
Congratulations to Griffin. They're able to back up that heartbreaking loss 2-0 last time out with a victory in this game. Nice game from Viper on the Ezreal. Chovy did Chovy things on the Zoe. It wasn't perfect. They had some macro mistakes in the mid game. That actually gave MVP quite a big sniff with how big ADD was on his return from the emergency room. Great to see him back in the team. They square up. They're not quite good enough to get over the hump, though. They make that mistake. Baron goes to Griffin, and in that Baron buff power play, we can't even show you cool numbers because the game ended.
Yep, and MVP, I mean, I felt like they had it all together for that one moment. That split second was capitalized on. Griffin turned it into the game win. Honestly, that's what happened, but it wasn't one of those games that you felt like it was over from the beginning. It felt like, it never really felt like Griffin was just the outright better team, because MVP, they had a game plan, they executed on it until one fundamental mistake was made towards the late game and everything went wrong. I mean, what happens when Motive doesn't start the game 0-2 and having a terrible Shen performance? I mean, what happens when MVP are the ones with the tempo lead?
Hopefully it means that Max is playing, is what I want to learn from that, because very hard to bounce back from quite as poor an early game as we saw. We had Tucson with a down series in series number 1. Motive was actually more underperforming in this game than what we saw from Tucson in our first series, so bring back a bit of experience. I know it's not ideal. I'm sure a lot of things were really accelerated with ADD being able to play today. I'm sure that was a late development. So hopefully MVP can find a way to solve their bot lane issues. They definitely did a big little assist to the side of Griffin in that area.
Yeah, they certainly did. Griffin, though, drafting pretty standard. I love to see Tarzan being very proactive on the Zac, but otherwise it was a composition that we've seen from a lot of our teams, not them trying to be tricky with Lucian funnels and weird stuff like that. Gonna check out the damage, of course. Viper is going to top it. He's an Ezreal, but Chovy up there as well on the Zoe. You can see the Poke champions doing work, and ADD, welcome back, my friend. If MVP are gonna look good, they're gonna look good with their top laner, he was still third in Challenger, even after a week of him being in the hospital.
He looked really good in game at number 1 here. He was a bit on a downward trend before he went away with his medical injury. Who knows if that was related, but he comes back. He looks rested. Good game 1 for him. Not enough for MVP to win.
Not enough. But game number 2, they should be able to find it, guys. We're going to have a short break. When we get back, more